Coming up, some high praise for Alabama quarterback Bryce Young and some wild twists on the coaching carousel. It's all on the way next on SEC Country Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome into SEC Country Live. My name's Brandon Adams. Big show for us today. Last week, we were happy to have Mike Johnson with us for the full show. And as a follow-up to that, we'll actually speak to Mike on the telephone today. Coming up in a few minutes' time, reaction to Alabama winning the SEC championship game. Georgia coming up short after being the number one team in the country all season long, where both the Dogs and the Tide go as the college football playoff gets ready to begin. We'll do that with Mike Johnson today, coming up around 3:45 Eastern Time or 2:45 Central, wherever you might be in the SEC country footprint there for that. That is coming up. Before that, though, obviously, if you look back on last Saturday's SEC championship win, I don't know if there was any bigger story to emerge than the play of Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. Obviously, he is a Heisman finalist now. That's not unexpected news, but what might have been salted away during the way in which Young played against the Georgia Bulldogs is that he's more than just a Heisman finalist. He actually might be the Heisman winner now. And, of course, sports radio host Colin Cowherd on FS1 this week, talking about Bryce Young, what he'd seen from Young, actually even takes that a step further, that according to what Dan Orlovsky had said on ESPN, that if the NFL draft were this year, if Young were to be eligible for this year's NFL draft, that he might go number one overall. Colin Cowherd says, yeah, I kind of agree with that, and, well, even a whole lot more there as well. So this is an example of the kind of praise that Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback, is getting on the heels of his performance against the Georgia Bulldogs last Saturday. This, Colin Cowherd on Bryce Young.
Dan Orlovsky used to play in the NFL. He's a commentator now. He said Bryce Young would go number one if he was available this year in the draft. And I agree. Bryce is I watched him play in California. Very unique talent. Now, Orlovsky compared him to Aaron Rodgers, and they are both very light on their feet. The ball comes flying out of their hands. Quick release. There's nothing I don't like about him, except he's a little thin. He's 6 feet tall and about 195. And if you're going to be a little smaller quarterback, I prefer you be Jalen Hurts or Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray. You're thick. Even those guys are hurt, and they're thick. And two of them play baseball and know how to slide. So he's a little thin, but I got to be careful about being too judgmental on that. So I think he's a better athlete than Tua. Tua's on a winning streak. And I think the Aaron Rodgers comparison, there's something there. The way he gets rid of the ball and sees the field. You know, it's some of this stuff, guys, is innate.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that it's innate, something that you just sort of have in you. I mean, there was certainly that feeling of watching Young on Saturday that he just looked like every superstar you've ever seen and every big game performance you've ever seen them in. I'm talking about crossover sports here. You know, the basketball guy, the NFL guy, the baseball guy, that sometimes game on the line, season at stake, football in your hand, or whatever the ball might be in the given sport, you just find a way to get it done. And certainly Bryce Young played on Saturday as if he had that in his DNA. And listen, you know, there's a lot you can say, obviously, about the Nick Saban dynasty at Alabama and the success that it's shown and it's had. But the fact that we now have multiple instances of quarterbacks at Alabama not just replicating the success of their predecessor, but probably taking the program to a new height because of that. I mean, think about this. In 2016, Nick Saban did something that season that he'd never really done before. He turned his attention to a young quarterback in the person of Jalen Hurts. And, you know, prior to that, the Alabama quarterback battle was almost always staged. It was almost always the kind of thing that kind of crept into the season a little bit. And eventually it seemed like Nick Saban in almost every single instance was going to finally settle on the most veteran presence in the room. That was just kind of like, for a long time in that middle part of the last decade, that's about what you could expect, that there's going to be a quarterback competition in Alabama. It's going to kind of creep into the start of the season, and eventually Saban will make up his mind and settle on the guy that's the most veteran presence. That's the most typical Alabama thing of all. Yet in 2016, Alabama went a completely different direction with that. They chose the freshman quarterback, Jalen Hurts, and they were obviously rewarded for doing so. Bama did not win that year's national championship. It became close. And obviously Hurts was a big part of that, put up big numbers. Then by 2017, they were going away from Jalen. You're going to Tua Tagovailoa, who obviously made the game-winning pass in the national championship. As weird as that was, Tua actually replaced Jalen Hurts, and Tua took the program from a performance standpoint to another level on top of that. Tua exceeded Jalen Hurts' play. And you kind of thought, well, Tua Tagovailoa is going to kind of go down as one of these history-making quarterbacks, all-time great with the Alabama at the Alabama program. But if anything, the guy that followed in his footsteps, Mac Jones, actually took the performance to another level. I would say for the most part, Mac Jones exceeded Tagovailoa's level of performance in his year as a starter at Alabama in 2020. Now you got a guy in Bryce Young who, this is just his first year. He's going to have at least 2 more years in the program, probably 2 more years in the program. And you certainly see remnants of a guy that has a chance to take this program to a level even that Mac Jones wasn't able to take it to. That may be the most amazing thing about the Nick Saban era, that this late in his career, he seems to not only keep replacing his quarterbacks, but he seems to keep improving upon his quarterback play with each and every guy that he brings in. And at a certain point, when you establish that level of dominance, that's just what you're able to do. Now, obviously, I am a Georgia fan. A lot of you know that. And I was, of course, just absolutely devastated by what happened for Georgia this past Saturday against Alabama. And when you think about if you're Georgia and you are lucky enough to get a national championship game rematch against the Crimson Tide, and if you have any hope of that next time being better than the last time, something else that Colin Cowherd points out in that clip that you just heard, I think, is a big part of this. He talks about Young being slight of build, and I don't know if that's a knock against him or not. I don't know. Certainly didn't seem to be on Saturday, and I guess that's kind of the point I'm trying to get to here, is that Georgia never really found out if Young was the kind of quarterback that wanted to stand there and take contact for 60 minutes. They never quite found that out. Got, one good lick on him, he dropped the football and then picked it right back up. But over the course of 60 minutes, I still don't quite think we know, and by we I mean all of us around the SEC, if we know what 60 minutes worth of Bryce Young taking a beating, what that would look like. He was almost like Floyd Mayweather on Saturday. It's like you couldn't even get close enough to him to really lay a lick on him. But if Georgia wants to have any chance of winning a rematch, what Cowherd touches on there has got to be a part of the equation. You've got to take a quarterback that is a little smaller. You got to take a quarterback that is a little more slight of build, and you've got to find out how much punishment he wants to be able to endure. This past Saturday, Young was simply too good to make that any kind of factor whatsoever. So that's above the fold here on SEC Country Live. Big day for Bryce Young. Probably wins the Heisman Trophy because of it, and certainly emerges now as the story in the remainder of the season. Is he going to be capable of putting 2 more of these superstar-type performances together and lead Alabama to another national championship? Now, on the flip side of that, we'll turn our attention to the Georgia Bulldogs, the SEC runner-up, also in the playoff, but certainly licking a lot of wounds after getting really exposed by Alabama last week. In fact, in the immediate aftermath of the game, Georgia coach Kirby Smart tried to put on a positive face in front about all of this, saying the way in which they were manhandled by Alabama can serve as a little bit of maybe a reinvigorating force for the Georgia program. This is what Kirby Smart said in the post-game press conference.
Oh, no, it didn't do any damage. No, what it did is reinvigorated our energy. It recenters you, right? I mean, I think one of their greatest thing is when they lost their game against Texas A&M, they were to garner some focus and some attention. I mean, to me, that's an opportunity for a wake-up call, if anything. Unfortunate that it comes in a setting like this. But, I mean, they're a really good football team, okay? And the narrative out there was, well, they just went at Auburn and they really struggled. And some of the sacks they gave up, their tackler didn't even get out of his stance. The crowd noise was a major impact there. Auburn played man most of the down, almost every single play, and they won a lot of their battles that we didn't win tonight. But we knew the narrative coming in, these guys can throw the ball, and they got a really good quarterback. And they gave him an opportunity to make plays, and he made a lot of really good plays along with their wideouts.
So Kirby says the SEC championship loss for Georgia can be a wake-up call, but a lot of folks wonder what it is that Kirby Smart's actually going to wake up to. Smart complimenting Bryce Young right there, the plays that he was able to make, and while ultimately Georgia's inability to stop Bryce Young, and of course wide receiver Jamison Williams, even after John Mechie, the other great wide receiver, left with an injury, Georgia's defensive inability to stop that is the number one reason that UGA didn't win this game. The fact that Georgia could not keep pace offensively, could not match the playmaking that Bryce Young was showing on his side of the field was obviously a big part of this there as well, leading some to wonder, okay, is this finally going to be, to use Smart's own phrasing here, the wake-up call needed to make a quarterback change and go back to your starter from the beginning of the season, JT Daniels, who had more accolades and a little bit more steam coming into the start of the season because he had played well down the stretch a year ago. Is this the motivating factor now to maybe make that decision, and how will you consider that going into the postseason? Well, Kirby Smart there once again on Saturday night, didn't really give a lot of credence to the notion that he's going to treat the quarterback spot any different than he would treat any other position, despite what a lot of Georgia fans say they see with their own eyes, and maybe some of opposing SEC fans might also agree with in terms of the comparison between Daniels and Bennett. Once again, this was Kirby from last Saturday.
We have a decision to make every week at every position, but I have the utmost confidence in Stetson Bennett and think he did some really nice things tonight, but we go and reevaluate everything all the time. But, he played well, and it's tough environment we put him in defensively, and we have to be able to run the ball and have a little bit of semblance of balance. And I felt like there was times tonight that we were getting into a scoring contest because our defense didn't get stops. And you don't want to have to do that. But I certainly have a lot of confidence in Stetson, and I have a lot of confidence in JT too.
I think one of the things that's true, whether Bennett's in for Georgia or whether Daniels would have come in, is that Georgia probably does not want to, probably could not win, as Kirby calls it, kind of a scoring contest against Alabama. Georgia needs the game to be played in the 30s and 20s to have a chance to win that, not in the 40s. That's just not the way that Georgia's built, regardless of which quarterback is in the game for the Bulldogs right now. I think the course of the last couple of seasons probably indicates that. Again, though, on Sunday, when Smart spoke on this subject, not only did you hear Smart on Saturday saying that, basically shrugging off the notion that they're going to contemplate a quarterback change going into the Orange Bowl, Smart also made it pretty clear that on Sunday, when he did a Orange Bowl preview press conference, that going back to last Saturday night's game, they never really seriously contemplated making a switch to Daniels during the game, even when Georgia was staring at a pretty big deficit, and Stetson Bennett added to that by throwing a couple of interceptions. Kirby Smart said they never really seriously considered making any kind of change. This Kirby Smart one more time.
As far as the Stetson JT question, no, we never discussed that on the headphones last night. And, obviously we have to play better in a lot of areas, but to put any part of that blame or all that blame on Stetson, there's a lot more to it than that. And we got to play better around him. We got to play better on special teams, defense, and really all facets of the game. There were some really, really, really good throws last night by Stetson, some throws that only his guy could catch the ball, and he made some good plays. And we got to continue to work on the poor decisions and a couple of the throws there that were picked off.
Of course, Jeremy Pettis is having fun with all this, saying that Michigan might just roll up on Georgia. Let me read Jeremy's comment here. He says Michigan just might roll the mutts. Bam exposed that young secondary. So Jeremy's feeling very good about his team right now and loving kind of mocking the Georgia Bulldogs a little bit there on that. But ultimately, it's actually Frank Mays' comment that I want to read on Facebook, because I think that kind of gets to the heart of the matter, at least as far as I can see it. As you might imagine, I do another show called Dog Nation Daily, and on that show, UGA fans weighing in each and every day. The last few days have been filled with quarterback conversations, intense debate. Most Georgia fans, at least the ones that are energized enough to speak up on this topic, want to see a quarterback change. And I've told them, and they haven't loved everything I've said about this, but I've told them that I'm not quite so sure the evidence argues for the quarterback change as much as you might think it might. Maybe a quarterback change would work out well for Georgia, but the actual situation, especially considering what Kirby Smart might know that we don't know, is a little more complicated than some folks might want to let on to. But what Frank Mays zeroes in on, and I think this is very important and very valuable, he says that the issue with Stetson Bennett is now 0-2 against Alabama, and that maybe a quarterback change should be considered for that reason more so than anything else. And I do think there's a lot to be said about that. That if you're a Georgia fan thinking about the chance to get to play Alabama for a third time over the course of the last two seasons, for a second time in this postseason alone, would you want to go back to what has unfortunately not worked out, at least unfortunately if you're not a Georgia fan, unfortunately not worked out the previous two times, or would you want to try something new here this time? And for a lot of Georgia fans, they definitely say, even if they are willing to acknowledge that no one really knows how Daniels would have played in place of Stetson Bennett on Saturday. All we do know is how Bennett played. We don't know how Daniels would have played. Even those that are intellectually honest enough to acknowledge that, I think still say that the curiosity of what it might look like with Daniels is a mission worth pursuing. And I think that's probably true there as well. I heard Tom Hart say, the SEC Network analyst, that it was to him a little bit of a red flag that they never even considered putting Daniels into the game. And maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I think my ultimate takeaway, though, here is, with everything that's being said, not just by Georgia fans, but analyst types and other non-Georgia SEC fans who are kind of weighing in on this topic, if everyone seems to be of the belief that Daniels would be the better option to at least try something different if an Alabama rematch comes, if Kirby Smart still doesn't do that, then at a certain point, don't you have to be forced to reckon with the idea that there might be a reason why? That is getting things going here on SEC Country Live. Above the Fold, big topics around the SEC. We've got a lot more of those coming for you here on our program today, including in just a little bit. We'll talk to Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American. Obviously, he's thrilled about the way the Crimson Tide played on Saturday, and we will get that with him coming up here in just a little bit. Before that, though, let me give a shout-out to my friends at Merriweather and Tharp. You hear this time of year a lot of folks talk about the strain on relationships and how hard that can be as you go through Thanksgiving, Christmas, holiday time of the year. It makes all that really challenging, and I certainly understand that. And if you find yourself in a similar situation, it might be time to think about divorce. And maybe you've tried everything you can to save the relationship, and you've considered all your options, and maybe this is just the option that you have left. Well, if you've got questions about the divorce process, Merriweather and Tharp has answers. Now, we always say that Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce, but they're really your source all around SEC country, based in Atlanta here in the state of Georgia, but a resource for you to use no matter which one of the states you may be tuning in from to watch our show here today. So let me encourage you to reach out. Their website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. They're filled with free resources, podcasts, blog posts. They have the opportunity to set up a free initial consultation with one of their divorce attorneys and get your questions about the divorce process answered. They'll listen to your story, and sometimes it's just kind of nice to have somebody listen to your story. They'll listen to your story. They'll talk about how the law impacts you, big, weighty issues like your finances, relationship with children, so much more. Merriweather and Tharp wants to help you with all of that. So reach out to them online. They're your source for divorce around SEC country. Find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. All right, let's move on here now. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is going to be relatively LSU-centric in a way. LSU had a lot, and I promise more of your comments coming up here in a little bit too. But LSU has had a lot of very interesting news topics kind of pop up here as of late. In fact, let me go back in time for a moment. Let's go back to November. Do you remember when the LSU coaching search was first getting ongoing, and it seemed obvious that LSU Athletic Director Scott Woodward would do again what he had tried to do before, which was reach for a coach that he's a friend with. Woodward likes hiring big-name guys. Jimbo Fisher was kind of out there. And yet Jimbo, as emphatically as one could, made his case for why he actually wasn't interested in the LSU job, even if no one would believe him on that. This is important for what's now happened over the course of the last 24 hours, but this is Jimbo Fisher back in November.
Here's a bet. I've told everybody I'm staying here, and I've told everybody I plan on being the coach at A&M. All right. And everybody thinks all coaches lie. I know y'all don't believe us, all right? We're going to recruit maybe as good a class. Here's a bet. Because I said the other things. I plan on being, I love the AD, I love the president, I love the chancellor, I love living here, I love being in my ranch, I love the family loves it here, I love Kyle Field, I love the people, I love all that stuff, and that's obviously not good enough, and I get it. I'm not mad at you. I'm sorry, seriously. I read the reports, people come to me. I say, I don't want to hear, I'm not interested. We may recruit, number one, we're going to recruit an unbelievable class this year, okay? So I'm either the dumbest human being on God's earth, okay, who's going to recruit all these guys to A&M so I can go across over here and go play against them, okay? If I did that, you ought to say, that's the dumbest human being. I don't want him to be my coach, okay? Guys, we're going to recruit a heck of a class. We're going to have special things here. We're building special things. They're investing in the program. They're investing in everything we got. We're building a culture.
So at the time, that was a very strong denial by Jimbo Fisher, which meant something then, but means maybe even more now based on some reports that have come out lately. I'm going to show you this tweet from Brett McMurphy about just how strong the offer that LSU was apparently willing to make to Jimbo Fisher was. Let me show you this on the screen here from Brett McMurphy. He says in late November, LSU was prepared to offer Fisher an 8-year, $125 million deal, $13 million per year to come to LSU. So sources told the Action Network. That's who McMurphy works for now, and obviously Billy Lucci had some of the same kind of stuff at one point in time there as well. That's gigantic dollars being thrown in the direction of Jimbo Fisher, and Fisher apparently told him no to stay there at Texas A&M. Now I take a few things from this. Here's the first thing I take from this. Texas A&M is the butt of a lot of jokes right now because it was a preseason top 10 team and did not really live up to that on the field. In fact, I think they only beat one team with a winning record. I believe that was, ironically, the SEC champion Alabama Crimson Tide. But for an A&M team that's supposed to be really good, kind of didn't work out that way. Obviously, the starting quarterback lost at the beginning of the season. It's a bit of a mitigating factor there on that. But ultimately, it also kind of comes down to, Jimbo Fisher, for as sharp an offensive mind as he's been, he hasn't really been able to create the kind of high-powered offense at Texas A&M that seems to be winning other places. So you might be left to conclude, well, I guess that just sort of means that maybe Jimbo really is an overrated coach and Texas A&M really is an overrated program, and maybe Aggies fans shouldn't be all that excited about what's going on in their program right now. You might be forced to conclude that's kind of what's going on there. But if that's the conclusion you draw, I believe that is a huge mistake. Because what you see is not just the reasoning that Fisher gave for turning down that $13 million per year offer, but the fact that the evidence of what Fisher said was the reason that he was going to turn that down coming to life. That the truth is, if you had a chance to have a whole lot more money in another job or a whole lot more talent in your current job when you're already really highly paid, having a whole lot more talent in your current job probably is the better professional decision. And sometimes, and you hear this for the folks who pay attention to like Wall Street and things like that, I mean, sometimes there's some underlying fundamentals that tell the real story more than the actual current results would appear to be. And that's certainly, I believe, true for Texas A&M. That in the offseason, on this show, with my mouth, I talked up the Aggies an awful lot. I was, figuratively speaking, buying a lot of stock in them. Let me tell you something. I hadn't sold any of it. Hadn't sold my stock in Jimbo Fisher. Haven't sold my stock in Texas A&M. This is a program making a legitimate push right now for the number one recruiting class. And they're not going to probably get there, but they're going to be in the top 5 or something like that. This is a program making that kind of move right now in recruiting. The fact that Fisher turns down that money at LSU to stay in College Station shows you how much he truly believes that. The A&M right now, by a record standpoint, does not appear to be one of the top teams in the SEC. But when it comes to brightest future, firmest foundation, when it comes to things going for you all the way around, I would say that A&M, justifiably so, is the envy of a lot of programs in this league, including maybe a few that actually had better records than Texas A&M did. That there's something potentially still pretty good happening at Texas A&M, even if it's happening a little slower than some folks want. The other thing I'll tell you is, it is going to be a very interesting comparison. We've done this kind of stuff in college football a lot. Can Brian Kelly at LSU be a better coach than Jimbo Fisher would be? I'm going to tell you, if I had my choice between Jimbo and Kelly, I'd rather have Jimbo Fisher. It doesn't take me any time to think about that. Fisher's won a national championship. Brian Kelly hasn't. And at Notre Dame, you ought to be able to do that, at least if you're really performing at the highest possible level. And Kelly came up just short. Fisher has won the kind of recruiting battles over and over that are paramount in the SEC. Kelly hasn't done that. Now, you've also got the fake accent deal and all that kind of stuff that Kelly pulled off during the introductory press conference. And that's a part of this too. Jimbo Fisher doesn't have to put on airs like that. He's just who he is. He was welcomed into that Texas community from the word go because he's just a guy comfortable in his own skin. He could be on like the Dutton Ranch at Yellowstone or something like that. He just sort of feels like he fits in there, where Brian Kelly's having to work pretty hard to try to fit in there at LSU. So big dollars could have come the way of Jimbo Fisher. They didn't get their guy. Brian Kelly becomes at least second choice, no better than that. Maybe third choice if you want to think about Lincoln Riley. And if you're Kelly, if you're an LSU fan, you better hope the reasoning in which LSU was pursuing other guys before it got to Kelly, you better hope those reasons don't show up, because I think there's a chance that he might. All right, let's get some comments here really quickly here on SEC Country Live here today. Tim Glover asking about the Heisman, coming up on Saturday, and obviously we'll find out then who gets a chance to win that. Eddie Arnold said not a big fan of Jimbo Fisher. He's okay, but not an LSU fit. Rick Keene checks in here on Facebook to say Kirby once again said after the Gator game that you can't outcoach talent. When the talent is equal, Kirby gets exposed. You much better get another coach if you want a national championship. Yeah, listen, Rick, I understand the desire to kind of push that, but I've said this many times, that people try to make it out like that 2021 is championship or bust for Kirby Smart right now. Couldn't be further from the truth. Time is on Kirby Smart's side. The guy that's got to win now, if he wants another championship, is Nick Saban. He's 70 years old. One way or another, he just doesn't have that much longer to coach. So if he wants more success in addition to the success he's already enjoyed, then he's the championship or bust guy. He's the guy that's got to win now. Kirby Smart, God willing, has another couple decades to do this job. And the talent level that Georgia has had doesn't show any signs of slowing down. So the notion that Georgia's going somewhere as a championship contender, I don't see any evidence to suggest it's disappearing from the national landscape. Do they still need to get over that hump against Alabama? Does Smart individually need to get over that hump against Nick Saban? Of course that's true. But, the idea that, you got to move on from Kirby, you've got to sort of panic if you're UGA. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, you may be a Florida fan if I'm remembering correctly. I get the idea that would be pushed as a way of maybe moving Kirby Smart, out of the way for other SEC programs, but I don't think that you're going to get that lucky on that. But a good comment. Kevin Zeminski, good to see you checking in. Appreciate that. Tennille Calvino, great to see you here there as well. Brian Whitehead says, that's the dumbest comment I've ever heard. Who's out there currently recruiting and producing more than Kirby? Yeah, I mean, if the only blemish on you as a coach is, you haven't beaten Nick Saban yet and you haven't won the national championship yet, when you're doing virtually everything but that. Now, listen, Georgia fans aren't going to be fully satisfied until a national championship comes, but as I've been pointing out on my other show a lot this week, you've got to notice the small steps that Georgia's also taking towards getting there. And over the course of years on this show, SEC Country Live, even going back years ago, I would have certainly touted Kirby Smart to win a national championship then when he was first on the job at Georgia, and really haven't seen anything over the course of that time that would cause me to change my mind on that. Michael Collins says, if you were to fire Kirby Smart, would you want to recruit against him? Heck, no, of course not. Of course that's the case. Let me go over to YouTube here for a moment because I haven't heard from the YouTube folks here today. Mark Morris on the subject of Max Johnson. Yeah, we're going to get to Max here in just a moment. He also thinks that Jimbo Fisher could be building a juggernaut there at Texas A&M. Blake Robinson checks in to give you a War Eagle. Obviously, right now, Auburn in the midst of trying to find an offensive coordinator. There's some interesting names, including ties within the SEC that have shown up as candidates there. Charles Haynes checks in to say Will Anderson, the reason why JT was not in the past, he's shown not to be able to negotiate the pass rush as well as Bennett. Yeah, Bennett is the better runner in comparison to JT Daniels. Bennett throws more interceptions. Daniels has a tendency to get sacked a little bit more. That's probably true. Catherine Anthony checking in today. Nice to see her in the comments section here today. Trey Dukes gives you the hashtag free JT. That's a Georgia fan that's hoping to see more of JT Daniels. Dave Weiss, Saban's critical errors as if he lost a step to Kirby, LOL. So they're in here talking about Nick Saban here a little bit, who's obviously had great success. And we'll take those comments and keep them running here on SEC Country Live here today. We'll also get Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American, here coming up in just a little bit too. Now, speaking of coaching stuff here right now, a little bit of news coming out of the University of Oklahoma, where, as you know, Brent Venables, the Clemson defensive coordinator, was hired as Alabama on the brain right now, Oklahoma head coach. And this obviously is a little bit of a culmination of a long-term story for Venables, because a lot of folks wondered, well, is he ever going to be a head coach? Is there some sort of reason that he's not becoming a head coach? Does he just want to stay a coordinator and work with Dabo Swinney forever? Well, eventually those questions were now answered that he's moving on to Oklahoma. And The next question becomes, well, for an Oklahoma program that's been so connected to elite offensive performance, especially with Lincoln Riley as its head coach, not enough defense to win a national championship, but enough offense to win in the Big 12 and make the playoff with regularity, what's the transition to a defensive-minded head coach going to be? Well, pretty interestingly, Oklahoma has reached into the SEC and stolen away its next offensive coordinator. The hand-picked guy to work with Brent Venables is Jeff Lebby, the Ole Miss offensive coordinator. Bruce Feldman writing that Ole Miss offensive coordinator play caller Jeff Lebby expected to become the new OC at Oklahoma. Lebby's an Oklahoma grad, former Sooner staffer. 24/7 Sports, Feldman says, had this first. And so, I mean, obviously if you're Lebby, even if you are the play caller in the OC, getting out from underneath the shadow of Lane Kiffin, who's such a renowned offensive mind, is probably valuable here. But this looks like a real coup in my mind, for Venables. And what it ends up reminding you of is the way in which Bob Stoops, when he first became Oklahoma head coach, and obviously he was a defensive-minded guy, had been defensive coordinator at Florida for a long time, but he kind of connects himself to Mark Mangino and Mike Leach and guys like that, that there was this sense that that he was going to introduce this high-powered offense to Oklahoma. For the most part, it really worked. Josh Heupel, back then as a quarterback, puts up big numbers, and there's a lot of the way that Oklahoma with Venables is building up its program, identifying Jeff Lebby, who's, I think a well-respected guy within SEC circles. There's a lot of this now that really reminds you and resembles what that was back then. So Oklahoma's made itself a pretty big hire. An SEC program that had a really good year loses its OC, and all of a sudden now, if you're Ole Miss, you kind of wonder what this means for the future of Lane Kiffin and everything else. So power move by Oklahoma coming into the SEC, yanking away an offensive coordinator that was on the rise. All right, SEC Country Live here, and of course, we're kind of in that lull heading towards bowl season, and a lot of you love – there's no better time than bowl season to make some bets on some big games. Obviously, that's always a lot of fun. I want to encourage you to use our friends at BetUS when you want to make your bets on the games. In fact, if you haven't signed up for your BetUS account, this is a great time to do so. Because when you use the promo code SEC125, that's SEC125, you're going to get a 125% bonus on your initial deposit. That means they're going to put more money in your account than you are to start with at BetUS. So go to BetUS.com, use the promo code SEC125, and you can take advantage of that today. All right, before we get Mike Johnson here coming up in a couple of moments, let's get some other stories of note here on the program today. Obviously, more news around LSU as quarterback Max Johnson, the starter for a good portion of the last couple of seasons for LSU, has put his name in the transfer portal. I'll show you the tweet from Johnson that made this official. Moving on there in Baton Rouge. Can we actually see the other tweet first, please? The official announcement from Max Johnson. Saying, LSU, thank you for allowing me to pursue my academic and athletic career here. I've made strong relationships with that will last a lifetime with the coaches and staff, and especially my teammates. With careful and prayerful consideration, I am entering the transfer portal. So that's a loss for LSU, and it's also potentially interesting. This is where other SEC programs kind of get impacted by this. When a quarterback of Johnson's caliber, his brother's also a four-star tight end, decommitted from LSU, on the heels of Max Johnson moving himself to the transfer portal. There's also some thought of, well, where might Max Johnson go? Is he going to come to my school? Is he going to go to my rival school? And how does all this play out? Well, we actually have some indication of what Max Johnson might be thinking here for his future. 24/7 Sports, among those reporting that Max Johnson and his brother, as I said, four-star tight end that was going to LSU, appear to be, according to Brad Crawford, a potential package deal to Florida State. Could be a storyline to watch after LSU quarterbacks Max Johnson's entering the transfer portal and his brother's decommitment. So 24/7 Sports suggests that Florida State could be a team to watch here for both the Johnson brothers, the LSU quarterback, the four-star tight end who was committed to LSU. And obviously if you take that, put that at Florida State, all of a sudden first-year Billy Napier, the job he faces at Florida gets a little bit tougher with a quarterback the caliber of a former SEC starter there in Tallahassee, and obviously a pretty big recruiting win to potentially get Max's brother along the way there too, so that's worth paying attention to. And then in the aftermath of that, how about what's left for LSU at the quarterback position? on the one hand, this appears to be a little bit of an open door for Garrett Nussmeier, former top-flight recruit who had gotten a lot of attention. But on the other hand, with Johnson leaving right now, that puts a little bit of a challenging situation ahead of Nussmeier getting ready for the bowl game and everything else, and kind of having to hit the ground running in terms of his chance to emerge as LSU starting quarterback. For a little bit more context on this, let's go back to when Miles Brennan got hurt, ending his 2021 season before it really started. And at the time, Ed Orgeron was very clear that Max Johnson was going to be the starting quarterback. This is obviously back when Orgeron was LSU coach. Very clear that Max Johnson would be the starting quarterback, was candid as to the reasons why. Also candid as to the reasons why Garrett Nussmeier, who appears to be the only quarterback left at LSU now, why he wasn't quite ready then. And we're about to find out, is he more ready now? For context on what's left over at LSU at the quarterback spot, this is Ed Orgeron from the summer.
Well, obviously Max is going to be our starter. He's got to have a great camp. The depth chart is there to stand, and he knows he's got to perform. But I believe in Max, just like I believe in Miles. And I think we got us a great quarterback, a great championship quarterback. Garrett's going to have to step up. Garrett's a very talented young man. I'm glad we got him. And, he just got to learn the offense, step up, and be able to take care of the football. He had some unfortunate picks in the spring, but I know he's going to get better with experience.
So that is Ed Orgeron, pretty candid there about Garrett Nussmeier. At the time, wanted to see him taking better care of the football, and if Nussmeier is going to emerge as the next quarterback there at LSU, that's also something he's going to have to be able to do. We're going to get Mike Johnson coming up here in about 2 minutes. Also, after Mike Johnson, let's talk some Florida recruiting after that, if you don't mind. We're going to do Mike Johnson here coming up. We'll get some Florida recruiting talk after that. One more thing I want to squeeze in, though, before we bring on Mike here right now, is another story that also has a little bit of an LSU tie into it. Do you remember Joe Brady? You probably do. Brady, passing game coordinator on the LSU team that won the national championship in 2019. Brady not only helped Joe Burrow make a name for himself, but Brady also made quite a name for himself in the process. After just 1 year on the job at LSU, keep in mind he's very young. After just 1 year on the job there at LSU, Brady became offensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers. And, well, for a while that seemed like it might work out, but then you have injuries to Christian McCaffrey and other issues, the lack of a real stable situation at the quarterback spot, and all of a sudden Brady wasn't quite the flavor of the month anymore there in Charlotte, and he was now removed from his position with the Carolina Panthers, and that's now a big name back on the open market again, once again for college football, a guy who obviously was instrumental in leading LSU to a national title there in 2019. So where might he go? Could he get paired up with Brian Kelly? Kelly obviously needs an offensive coordinator, given the fact that Tommy Rees, the Notre Dame OC, decided to stay in South Bend, not come down to Baton Rouge. Well, as of now, the rumor train connecting Brady once again to LSU really hasn't left the station. But there is another spot where Brady's name's kind of come up here a little bit, and it's at least worth your attention. Joe Brady, who obviously hails from South Florida originally, has shown up as a candidate to join Mario Cristobal, who's becoming Miami head coach. Brady as his offensive coordinator. Once again, let me show you this on Twitter here. Tim Reynolds, who covers that scene down there very well, says that there's interest in both sides about Brady, who, as I said before, hails from South Florida, coming to Miami. This is from yesterday, saying that Brady's got a lot of options. Right now it's just interest, but he said it was worth watching. And certainly in the time since Reynolds has tweeted that, it seems like this rumor might be heating up a little bit more. So once again, this is one of those things that impacts Miami, and I guess if you're a Florida fan, kind of impacts you there in the Sunshine State if the Gators, watch the Hurricanes make a big-time hire here. But it's also kind of interesting that maybe for a lot of LSU fans who hope that the removal of Brady as the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator might signal a return back to the SEC. Apparently not quite so fast on that. You might see, it appears, Joe Brady on his way to the Miami Hurricanes instead. So we'll keep our eyes on all of that. All right, before we're done here, we have a very funny SEC LOL today. It's actually a little bit more LOL than SEC, but nonetheless, I think it's going to be really, really enjoyable for you who haven't seen this as of yet. There's a little bit of Florida stuff I want to get to related to the current state of Gators recruiting. Obviously, Billy Napier in a tough spot, just now getting that job and trying to put some semblance of a 2022 class together. We'll cover all that, but fair and balanced here. We obviously talked a lot last week about the SEC championship, and at the time, I think the lion's share of the opinions probably thought that Georgia was going to get it done, was going to win. and knock off the Alabama Crimson Tide and allow Kirby to finally get that win against his old boss, his old mentor. It did not happen. The Alabama Crimson Tide reign in the SEC once again. So as a follow-up to last week's conversation, our former co-host and a guy that we hope to have around here on this program as much as we can possibly get him, our buddy Mike Johnson joins us again, former Alabama All-American. Mike, I guess, first of all, thanks for being back here with us this afternoon for a few minutes, and I'm sure you were thrilled to get a chance to watch that last week. What did you think of the way in which that Alabama just dismantled Georgia?
Hey, BA, I appreciate y'all having me back on the show, man. Obviously, it's a little bit different than I think a lot of people saw it going, and, I myself included in that. I mean, I'm not going to make any bones about it. It's not like I was jumping out there going, hey, Alabama's going to win by 17, 21, whatever it is. It was exciting. I don't want to say shocked. I think shocked is a little bit too strong of a word, but I was excited to see how it went. I mean, my feelings going into the game, and I think a lot of people felt this way, was, Bama can't win unless it can run the football and kind of take the clock away from Georgia. And turns out they didn't really even try that much. I think you got about 60 yards out of your running backs, and your quarterback was able to do some things with his legs, and wasn't design runs like a lot of people thought it was, just getting the ball out of his hands. And it's just funny, BA. It's you and I talk about comparing that Georgia team to the Bama team of 10 years ago, and I guess the best answer I can give you to how shocking it was is football has just changed. Football has changed a lot. You need that dynamic quarterback presence, and things are just different than they used to be.
One of the things I said early in the show before you had a chance to join us was one of the most amazing things about Nick Saban right now is that the quarterback play, not only is he replacing capable guys, but every time he makes a quarterback replacement, the guy keeps getting better. I mean, I think that Tua was an upgrade over Jalen Hurts. I think Mac Jones probably turned out to be an upgrade over Tua Tagovailoa. And given the fact that Bryce Young's got 2 more years left in this program, you would think, and the way that he's playing right now, it appears that Bryce Young, the next in line, may be the best of them all. I mean, that's what's really so amazing here. It's not just that you're maintaining a level of play year to year, but the quarterback position, which, if you want to go back to when you were at Alabama, was not quite yet a superstar spot on the roster as of yet. But in recent years, I mean, each time they make a quarterback replacement, the dude just keeps getting better and better. Young, maybe the best of them all here.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back at really the first half of Nick Saban's tenure, maybe even more than that, you look and the quarterback's just an afterthought. I mean, it always has been for Nick Saban, and it became more clear to me than ever that you really have to have that presence this past weekend. And I think, it's kind of tying it into SEC Country Live and some of the topics that you and I talked about the other day. I think when you look around the conference, it's really the haves and have-nots at that position. I mean, you look down at the things that have happened at LSU. It was a headline 3 years ago when you and I did SEC Country Live. When's the last time LSU signed out of high school a dynamic quarterback? I mean, you got Joe Burrow as a transfer, but you look at Florida and you think the same thing. When's the dynamic quarterback going to be a part of what you're doing? I mean, there's teams in the conference that have good quarterbacks. But I'm talking about great quarterbacks at your championship level. I agree with you, though. I mean, like I said, it was an afterthought, the quarterback position, when I was in school, it seemed like, and I love those guys. But it just, it was all about the running back. And right now, you have a dynamic quarterback, and really, I love Brian Robinson to death. You don't really have that much of a dynamic running back at Bama right now. And it's just crazy how things have changed, crazy how things have adapted. That staff's done a good job over at Alabama. But I think there's a lot of other programs on the SEC, in my opinion, BA, that were looking themselves in a mirror this past weekend saying, hey, do we have what it takes at any position dynamically to win this conference? And I think a lot of them are probably saying no when they look at what they saw this past weekend.
Cynthia Giannini on Facebook says she believes Jalen Milroe can be the next superstar after Bryce Young's time is done. We'll find out about that, I guess, in a couple of years. And obviously on the Georgia side of this, a lot of Georgia fans watching the way that Bryce Young played, even though I think the failings of the Georgia defense actually cost Georgia the game more so than Stetson Bennett's performance. It is certainly fair to say that Bennett did not keep pace very well with Bryce Young in this game. That leaves a lot of Georgia fans to say, well, maybe then, or some fans take it beyond the maybe, saying definitely Georgia should go back to JT Daniels, the guy that was supposed to be the start at the beginning of the season, and give him a chance to try something that Stetson Bennett's tried now twice and come up short in both times, chance to beat Alabama. You're not a Georgia guy. You're an Alabama guy, but you obviously watch UGA closely. You and I talk about this stuff all the time, of course. If it was you, would you go back to Daniels here, or would you assume that Kirby Smart must have a good reason for doing what he's doing?
I'm on the Stetson Bennett bandwagon. I don't just say that as an Alabama guy. I mean, you and I had the same conversation about Jake Fromm and Justin Fields a couple of years ago.
Yep.
I think it's just so easy. I think it's so easy to look at the backup quarterback and say, oh, maybe that guy's the answer. That guy's got to be the answer. He's a 5-star signee. He's got to be the guy to go to. But I don't think you're giving Stetson Bennett a fair shake when you put it like that. I mean, the reason Georgia, think about it, Georgia went 12-0 now with Stetson Bennett in the system they were running. And all of a sudden something's not successful. Maybe your defense gives up so many points. And now all of a sudden Stetson Bennett's not the guy. He's not the only issue. I think that when you look at some of the other problems that happened on Saturday, I mean, do you need a dynamic quarterback? Absolutely. But I think it's unfair to say, hey, man, this guy worked for 12 games. Now he doesn't work. Now it's time for the backup to come in. It's not fair. I mean, that program did a lot of good things throughout the season. They are what they are at that point. Bama lost the game this year. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people looked at the situation over there and go, oh, man, what's happening? I think you stick to the plan. Kirby has delivered a ton of wins over at Georgia. He obviously knows what he's doing and can put them in a situation to be successful. So trust the process, find a dynamic signal caller, and I think things will change. But until then, your system is what it is. You run a ground and pound offense. You enjoy the riches of that throughout the season, and so I don't think SEC championship or college football playoff is time to pull the plug on that.
How surprised would you be if Cincinnati kept it close against Alabama?
I don't think I'll be surprised at all, B.A. I'll be honest with you. It's such a Jekyll and Hyde Alabama football team. You just don't know what you're getting from one week to the next. And there are some times when they look absolutely dominant on defense. The front seven's flying around. The secondary is just glued to the hip of the receivers. And then other times that offense or that defense looks like they have no clue what they're doing. Don't know what the coverage is. Don't communicate very well. Offensive line can be included in that. You had a new starter at center this past week from Buford, Georgia. A lot of people will be familiar with, and you don't know what you're getting out of some of those units. So I won't be shocked at all. Listen, with a month, to prepare, and the biggest game in the history of that program, I have to think they're going to come in with an incredible game plan. They're going to try to keep Alabama's offense off the field. I don't see how much no huddle unless they get into a personnel situation that they'll be doing. And I'm guaranteed they're going to have success. I played a Utah team back in the Sugar Bowl in 2008 that nobody gave a chance to, and they thumped us pretty good. So, I think this is going to be a better game than most people expect it to. Hopefully the talent shines through down in Alabama. Listen, I think it could be a score football game going into the fourth quarter, and at that point, anything's possible.
Let me squeeze in one final thing before we let you go. A lot of Georgia fans say right now they're not even sure they want a rematch with Alabama. The one on Saturday went so poorly, but if Georgia can get its way back there and see the Crimson Tide again in Indianapolis, do you see any reason to believe that the next result could be different, game closer, maybe a Georgia win? Any reason to believe the next time could be different than the last time?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. One of the things you and I used to talk about it. One of the good things that comes from a loss is the fact that the coordinators and the people doing the game plan can kind of loosen up what they're doing. You're coming off a loss. You're going, well, we lost with this last time. When you're 12-0, you're not going to change anything. You're 12-0. You just won 12 games. You're not going to do anything different. Hey, we are what we are. When you have a month to prepare and you're coming off a loss, I think that you can change a lot of things about what you're trying to do. Maybe move the quarterback around. Maybe design a couple of different plays that you didn't have before. And Georgia fans, look, I'll take you back. What was it, 2017? The Auburn-Georgia rematch there in the SEC championship game. I mean, things played out completely different in rematches, especially with stuff on the line like there have been in those kind of games. So, Alabama-LSU rematch from 2011. I can go on about the second time that these teams have played in these series in the same season, and things are different because it loosens you up. When you lose, you have to go back to the drawing board, and you have to do things differently the next time around. So I wouldn't be scared at all if I'm Georgia. They were favored the first time around. Maybe it's a pick 'em the second time around if they match up, depending on what happens in the first round. But listen, I'll be ready to watch if they square up again because it's going to be a really, really good football game.
Well, Mike, it's so great to get a chance to talk to you. I hope we get a chance to do this a whole lot more now that you got a little time on your hands during this off season. So fun stuff. Mike, thanks for being here, and we will certainly look forward to getting a chance to do this again very soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, brother. What's up?
Mike Johnson there, former Alabama All-American. Great to have him. He was with a full show last week. Of course, a lot of you may or may not know this. Years ago, Mike was co-host on this show. We did this show together each and every day, and Mike's coaching now, doing a great job with that. And so when we can steal away some of his time, we always enjoy the chance to be able to do just that. Really, really enjoyable to have Mike Johnson on the program here today. Funny SEC LOL to wrap things up before we're done. You talk about a bizarre rollout. Lincoln Riley's introduction as LSU, or I should say as USC head coach, was really pretty wild and, frankly, more than a little bit awkward. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. Before that, though, speaking of awkward, it can be a little bit of an awkward transition when you become a head coach, especially in the early signing period era. You have to get going very, very quickly, and it is just not easy all the way around. Well, Billy Napier announced as Florida coach, and obviously Napier had a chance to meet with reporters recently, kind of talk about the job that kind of awaits him there with all of that. And one of the things that Napier was asked about, and in fact, in the press conference that he did, at the beginning of this week, it was like the first question out of the box. He's introduced and he's talking and he's, saying everything. Remember, he had just finished up the Sun Belt Conference title game, so he had to finish there at Lafayette before he came over to Gainesville. And, after his opening statement, first question out of the box is, are you going to be able to get those 4- and 5-star recruits there in Gainesville? Obviously, hearkening back to what was such a big failure during the Dan Mullen era. And, Billy Napier kind of laid out his thoughts about what he expects the recruiting apparatus at Florida to look like, including maybe sidestepping the idea of how much he's going to buy into the notion of the star ratings. This is Billy Napier on that topic.
We've got to sign around 25 players a year, right? And I think that there's enough out there. I think the important part here is that we don't get consumed with the stars, 4-star, 5-star. I think it's going to be more about evaluation, right? We're going to go through a very thorough evaluation process. We're going to hire an army of people here. We're going to create an infrastructure, not only in the personnel department, but also from an on-campus recruiting, creative media, name, image, and likeness. We're going to create, we've got a great vision for the organization that we're going to create here. So we're the University of Florida, right? We've got a lot to sell here.
So I'm obviously a Georgia guy. I like to make fun of Florida all the time. Georgia-Florida, big rivalry. That's just kind of what goes on. And you may be quick to assume that I'm going to make fun of Florida in this particular instance there too. And in this particular case, you'd actually be wrong. I think that actually Napier is inheriting a very tough situation. And I don't think you can expect too much from him coming into early signing period like this. Frankly, to make the comparison between Georgia and Florida again, when Kirby was hired in 2016, there was no early signing period. And everything that's happened since 2018, when that was first instituted, has just been way different. That you've got such a short on-ramp to guys making a decision. You're just going to do well to get whatever players you can. Now, that still counts, and that roster deficiency created by that is still the kind of thing you're going to live with for a couple of years. But ultimately, what Napier is going to be tasked with is building the kind of thing that can have success in 2023 and 2024 and into 2025, that you almost have to give him a little bit of mulligan there for 2022. And, kind of along those lines, already, you've had Julian Humphrey and Shamar James have been gone from the Florida class. And then in recent days, you've had a recent spate of even more of these decommitments. Let's talk about Chandler Smith, 4-star wide receiver. He's out of the program just the other day, kind of put that there on social media, that he was ready to move on and look at some other stuff. It's respect my decision season around Gainesville. Chandler may be the first one of those. Then you had Nick Evers, the 4-star quarterback. He had a chance to meet face-to-face with Billy Napier. And he says with the heaviest of heart, after much prayer, he's decommitting from the University of Florida, hoping to find a new path there quickly. And then to top it all off, Jaden Gibson, another wide receiver, also announced that he is leaving the Florida 2022 class. So that's a lot of departures, a lot of big names. You've also got Isaiah Bond, who recently decommitted from Florida and quickly jumped into Alabama's class. It is just open season on every 2022 recruit for Florida. But as I said before, I'm really not going to make fun of this too much or mock Napier over this kind of stuff too much. And if you're a Florida fan, what I would say is, If you listen to what Napier said in that clip I played for you before, now, the notion they're not going to care about star rankings, first of all, I don't believe that. And second of all, that does sound a little bit like some of the stuff we've heard Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen say. But pushing that aside, a couple of things that Napier talks about that I do think are valuable. Thing number one, he's openly embracing the NIL era there. And while no SEC coach can be publicly against name, image, likeness, revenue for players, there are certainly a handful of coaches in the SEC that don't fully embrace this as much as others do. So the fact that voluntarily Napier brings up his plans for NIL and Florida's desire to help players cash in on that, that's a level of aggression around that topic that not every SEC program is going to show. So could that end up being a little bit of an advantage for Napier? It might. But here's the other thing, and this is one of the things I think is really eye-opening, that he says, we're going to hire a ton of people. We're going to hire basically social media edit people to make cool creative graphics. We're going to hire the kind of recruiting support staff that we need. Obviously, that would seem to show a commitment to Napier as he takes the job. The other thing it brings to mind is the fact that those guys didn't or gals, guys and gals, people, those people didn't exist around the Florida program before Napier got there. I mean, that's the thing about Florida is for a program that's got as much championship heritage as anybody, couple national titles under Urban Meyer, won a national title under Steve Spurrier, became a national brand under Steve Spurrier. Florida's essentially what seems to me a couple hundred miles away from where I sit here in the capital of SEC country. Seems to be a little bit of a frugal program from time to time. And if Napier's saying, hey, we're going to hire all these people to help us with our recruiting machine, it kind of means that he didn't really inherit those kind of people when he first got there. So I think all of that speaks to what a long job, arduous journey it's going to be for Billy Napier to have any chance to prove if he belongs here or not. Now, it is true that he may work hard for 2-3 years and all that promise that he seemingly had, maybe he ends up not being very good either. But for now, it's just way too early to judge Napier on anything that happens in the 2022 class, and that's probably a good thing because the sense that you get right now is it's going to be a disaster. All right, speaking of disaster, maybe not quite a disaster, for Lincoln Riley being announced as USC coach here recently, but it was certainly pretty awkward. Now, I'm going to show you this as captured by somebody on Twitter as it appeared on television. What you're going to see is Riley's there in L.A. Obviously, one of the things you think about when you think about USC are those cheerleaders, or as they call them, the song girls. You got the USC marching band. All of this just gets really weird, and I want you to watch in the background of this video as all this stuff is playing out. Riley's just standing there watching it. Like, this is very strange. Take a look at this.
Lincoln and his family, the song program, and the #1 fight song in the nation.
So first of all, there's like 5 people clapping. This room is nowhere near full enough for a guy like Lincoln Riley. He doesn't know which steps to walk up on. Like, how do you not have this planned better? But it gets way weirder after this. So you got like 9 members of the marching band, 3 cheerleaders. Riley's just standing there. And now all heck is about to break loose here on this. This is a coach, meanwhile, you're spending $100 million on, and you've essentially made him a sideshow addition to what is basically like a chamber ensemble deal here. Watch this, y'all. Like, I get the fact that you want to have some excitement, but how come there's only 3 cheerleaders? Like, is this one of those deals where, or as they call them, song girls? Like, and first of all, some of this dancing gets a little suggestive before it's all said and done. Like, I don't have any idea what any of this has to do with hiring a coach. And meanwhile, Riley's just standing back there. I mean, he's just standing back there. And these girls, I mean, they're just giving it all they got. But why is there only 3? Look at that. But why is there only 3 of them? Like, were the rest of them busy? And why are there like 9 people from the marching band? If this was the SEC, there'd be 1,000 people in this room, and all anybody would care is what the brand new coach has to say. But meanwhile, you got all this going on. Y'all, this goes on for 2 minutes. We don't have to show the whole 2 minutes. We can pull out of it now. But this goes on for 2 minutes, and Riley's just standing. Look at him. He has no idea what to do. He could be forgiven if he was rethinking the whole thing right now. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, he's like, what have I gotten myself into? Maybe I should have gone to LSU. At least they would have had some gumbo or something at my, first press conference. Meanwhile, USC's got 9 band members and 3 cheerleaders. But listen, with the 3 that showed up, I mean, they are giving it their all. They are going 110% there on all of this. So a very strange way for Lincoln Riley to be rolled out as brand new USC coach. We'll make that our SEC LOL for today. We appreciate you being with us on the program today, too. We will see you back again next time, getting closer to bowl season, finding out a couple teams from the SEC in the college football playoff and a lot of other postseason games worth discussing. Oh, yeah, by the way, next week also starts the early signing period there as well. So we'll cover all that with you next time. It's SEC Country Live. We will look forward to seeing you then.